And let's fight here with an unusual piece of monthly insights, if you like. There weren't really any specific questions, but I kept seeing a theme coming up, and that is, how do I put together a coherent story from beginning to end when it comes to ad, then landing page, etc. And one thing that stood out to me was, well, what kind of images do I use, and what do I put on there to get people's attention, pull them in, and then drive them through the story. So here is some advice on images I wrote up in the context of a very specific example. So I'm going to show you that example first. That's what it basically says. Now that the context is set, I'm going to give you the very quick summary. If you look in Marketing Gems, it is, I think, in the third month or so, you'll see that whole case study. But here's the quick summary. No, not here. Here. So basically, what we've got here is it's not the landing page, it's the thank you page. After people have seen the ad, they go to the landing page where they can hand over their email address or exchange the email address for access to this video. And they do a lot of things right. The color scheme is the same throughout. The use of emojis is consistent throughout. The headline is consistent throughout. And then this video is in here. And in this video, Wilco talks about basically three things. This video comes in three segments. The first one is basically talking about himself, his story of discovery, showing why this is important. And that's cool. Then the middle bit is basically, as promised here, the three weird mistakes. And that's the centerpiece of this whole video. And there are really good tips on how to get more out of your Facebook campaigns. And then towards the end, there is a pitch for his product, Connect Explore, which you can then buy down below this video. Up to the point where we started talking, the big question was, well, how do I follow up? How do I retarget? Because people get to this page by signing up to an email list and optionally also to Messenger. And then the question is, well, how do we retarget them? What kind of ad do we use to put in front of them to remind them to watch this video, and secondly, of course, check out that special offer at the bottom. And my response wasn't, hey, look, you just use this image or that image or the other image, but it was a bit more differentiated. And that's really the whole context here. So the context is, you need to take into account where people are at, what it is they have done so far, or what they have consumed in terms of content, and then you follow up with the appropriate image. So the idea here is, if someone has just seen the ad on Facebook, which incidentally is also a short video, and they've signed up but then haven't even started watching this video, then there's no point talking about the product yet. They are just about familiar with the face. Oh, just about. They don't even know what the pain points are. They don't know what these three weird mistakes are. They don't know what the product is. So any mention of those pain points, any mention of the product is a waste, because all they've seen so far is, there's this dude and he does funny things, as you'll see in a minute. I'll show you the examples, and that's about it. Whereas if they've gone maybe halfway through the story, they've watched him, they know who he is, what his background is, what he brings to the table, what his credentials are. So now they've started bonding with him, and they've maybe seen the first weird mistake or the first couple, and then they stopped. Now it's a whole different story. Now we can pick them up at the three weird mistakes. And of course he uses very specific imagery in here and testimonials, which would then make sense to someone who's gone that far in the video. And then at the very, very end, when he talks about the product and the bonuses, Connect Explore, it now makes sense. People have been exposed to the message, hey, there is a solution to these weird problems, and it's probably worth looking at, depending where you're at in your business. So, that's basically the context. Two important points here. The first one is, when you design your own ad campaigns, keep that in mind. Keep in mind how much people have consumed of your content. Not assuming they have all gone through all the way to the end and clearly they are being stupid and why are they not buying. That's the typical mistake a lot of marketers make. They think, hey, look, I'm assuming you are ready to buy. Now let me follow up in that specific way. Let me follow up assuming you want to buy, but there's one piece of information missing. So let me crank up the bonuses. Let me drop the price somewhat. Let me add some urgency and scarcity. No, that is nonsense. as you've just seen from this example, it all depends how much people have seen. And the reality is, very few people spend the time and go through this whole thing. I mean, reading the Facebook ad, it's a fairly lengthy ad, will take a couple of minutes, so you need to have someone who is committed. Then you come to a video which I believe is about 6 minutes long, so they have to be pretty darn committed and not just say, I'll save it for later. Because guess what? That's what I personally do a lot. I see an ad, I find it interesting, I go, ooh, that's interesting. I look at the video, oh man, that's 5 minutes. I don't have 5 minutes right now, so I'll save it for later. And we all know what happens when you save things for later, right? In most cases, nothing happens. And now, of course, this one, as you can see here, is a 21-minute video. So they might have committed to the 6 minutes and handing over their email address, and they go, oh, 21 minutes. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that on the weekend. And that's why it's so important to keep that in mind. Alrighty. This here, I think, is a nice little framework you can print out and keep at the back and front and top of your mind at all times when you are looking for imagery to tell a story. Basically, your ad or your image has a particular job in an ad, and that is primarily to get people's attention. I'll highlight a couple of points later on, but in the old days, an ad on Facebook, let's actually go to Facebook, alright? Facebook, and let's look for some ads. Here is my timeline. So now you're starting to see what is happening in my life. Walt says something, it was raw. Okay, cool. Let's look for the first ad. Here's an ad. Okay, this is a bad example because they are using a carousel, but even in here, you see there's not much text. Okay, let's see what the next one is. Next ad, where are you? No, here we're at. Okay, so there's a video ad, no text. Let's look at what I'm trying to highlight to you here is that in the old days, ads had a lot of text in there. People were basically trying to tell a whole story. You know, there's an image to attract your attention, then there's the headline to get people really excited, and you know, some features and benefits. Here, sponsored. Again, the only text you see here is a very, very thin line at the very top, which you can do by creating a square video, and some text overlay. And that's it. So, no more text in here. And that's really what I'm trying to show you, that the image in an ad, in an image-based ad, or even when you think about the imagery, the main point is to get people's attention, to stop the scroll. As you just saw, I scrolled very, very quickly, and your main job, or the main job of that image in an ad, and this is the key thing, is to get people's attention and start telling a story. Something where people go, ooh, that looks interesting. And honestly, quite often, all it is there is another human being and they have a facial expression and I connect to it. And that's why you want to make that, have something that makes an emotional connection. I mean, that could be at all levels. It could be happy, it could be sad, it could be disgusting. Anything that stands out and makes people get an instant response. There's no thinking required. It's like, boom, okay, I am stopping. And that's really what this is. I want people to stop and then check out the rest of the ad. That's really all you want to achieve with a picture. And then, if we now go beyond the context of, or the specific application of ads, if we go towards what happens on subsequent web pages and marketing materials, whether it's a video page like this, whether it's your emails you're sending out, whether it's the messenger bot, whatever, you want to continue telling, and this is the key thing, it's not that story. You want to continue telling the story appropriate for how people went through that story. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, if people have gone to the just this page, but they haven't continued in the story. That's the key thing. It's self-select these days. People go in and they start consuming. They are in control of how they consume the story. It's like reading a book. I put the book aside, I go and drink a coffee, right? And you cannot assume that they kept reading at a constant speed and now it's time for the cliffhanger. No, they will get to the cliffhanger when they are ready. So, continue that story at their pace. Okay, let's add that in there. And the one thing you want to do there is build brand recognition. Let's put in brackets here the KLTR. Right? It's KLT stands for know, like, and trust. So they know you, they are familiar with you, they like you, hopefully. And that is not something you can force. It's basically, my advice there is be natural, be yourself. And as a result, you will automatically appeal to people who like that style, and you will automatically not appeal to people who don't like that style. What comes to mind right now, because it's tax return time here, is I naturally have the hair at the back of my neck standing up when I go to any of these buildings full of people who are total bureaucrats, who do nothing but bureaucracy. Right? I don't like them, and they probably don't like me. When they see my tax return, they go, how can you possibly just have a shoebox full of receipts? Well, that's the way it is. Right? There's no point pretending you are one thing when you're not. You will naturally attract those who like you for who you are. And trust comes from being respectful. And go and have a look at the other videos. Have a look at the, for example, the how to get started with email marketing video I put out the other day. It is the foundation of any relationship is trust, and trust comes from being respectful where people are in their decision-making cycle, not assuming that they are ready to make that buying decision. Actually, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put that in here, because I've mentioned this a couple of times now. So if you go to Google and you Google Chet Holmes, actually let's go over here and let's do it here because that's a smaller window. Chet Holmes, and you go to images, and there is, oh no, we want Chet Holmes pyramid. This thing, that's what we want. This image right here explains what I've tried to put into words. Here are the 3% at the very, very top who are ready to buy. Yet most marketing, and all marketing, pretty much assumes that everyone is up here. But as you can see, 97% of people are not at the point where they are ready to purchase. They might be open to buying, but they're not looking. They're not thinking about it. They're indifferent. They actively think they are not interested, or they know they aren't interested. These people are definitely not interested. And yet, most marketing simply says, hey, look, special offer, bonus, urgency, scarcity. Okay, and that is what causes buying resistance. So, if we go back to this here, trust, know, like, and trust. The trust part comes from you being respectful where people are at. If you go in and say, look, I know you are not interested, but I am going to exploit hardwired responses like urgency and scarcity and bonuses to push you to purchase. I'm going to push you to buy my thing. I'm going to explore your ignorance. I'm just going to make some claims and I will get you to buy something. That is not building trust. That's the kind of the thing I'm trying to drive home here. So in the know, like, and trust formula, the way you build trust is being respectful of where people are at. And when you identify that they are down here, you don't push them to a sale. You are respectful of this. And if they have any needs, any desires, any questions, you answer them respectfully and truthfully. And the same goes for this level and this level. And only when people are ready to go up here, then that you make them an offer. And you say, look, thank you for checking out this offer, and now you can use urgency and bonuses and scarcity, because let's face it, at the end of the day, there is competition and you need to stand out in some way. Alrighty. So, big picture, really with our imagery, we want to do two things. Number one, we basically need to get the right people's attention and ideally start building a story, building an emotional connection. And on subsequent pages, on subsequent marketing materials, we want to continue telling that story at their pace, meaning picking them up where they left off and being relevant. As in, if they left off in the story where they were talking about you were the centerpiece, well, that's where you pick them up. If the centerpiece was your product, well, you pick them up at the product. Alrighty, so here are a couple of examples and requirements. Number one, get people's attention. It's basically a human thing, and when you look at the Facebook newsfeed, you kind of start to see that it has a certain look and feel. So if we go back to Facebook, there's all this grey, there is blue, and we kind of need to stand out in these images, in the newsfeed. And you see, well, here for example, they did a good job with the red that stands out. This one here doesn't really stand out that much. I mean, it's kind of interesting, the tool, etc. And it's the fast-moving nature of the images, so that kind of stands out. Here, it's whatever. The fact that this guy is, probably in winter, but that could be much more dramatic, but before you realize that it's actually winter and why it's so cool to stand out. So the idea is to have something that stands out in here. No, that's not what we wanted. 1 second here. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong link here. The first thing you want to do is you need to stand out of the image, out of the typical Facebook surroundings. And when you decide to use images, stock images, please don't use your typical stock images. I mean, this one here it looks like everything else. So this is a bad example of how to get people's attention, because it looks like everything else. They've seen this a million times over and over. So I encourage you to think about your market. What is the kind of imagery people have seen a million times over, and then don't use those kinds of images? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up an image, and there's a link here, and because it's a Shutterstock image, I didn't buy it, so I'm just going to link to this thing here, and we're going to look at it. Alright, here she is. This image, because it is such a contrast. It's the yellow background, it's this interesting facial expression. Let's make her a bit bigger here. There you go. Isn't that a fantastic image? I mean, this literally jumps off the page in Facebook. Whereas the standard stock image thing, we saw this one here, that is something that, yeah, blah. I've seen it a million times. Thank you very much. Not that interested. So, first thing, do something to stand out. Use color, like the one I've just shown you. Use interesting poses or expressions. Again, the one I've shown you, that's an interesting expression. If you don't use, or when you don't use images of people, you use unusual objects, for example. There, the advice is zoom into the one thing that is interesting. Avoid big scenes like this here, because when you look at this here on, for example, on a mobile phone, on a small screen, and you're scrolling quickly, these faces are going to be so small, it's very hard to realize or recognize what's going on. And the same goes for objects. If you have any objects, use objects with bold elements, big elements, solid elements, something where it's immediately obvious what's going on. Here is, because it was the whole thing I did here in the context of this ad campaign for Wilko's product, Connect Explore, I took a couple of screenshots here. In the original video, or in some of the videos, and you can watch these here on his Facebook page, you just go to, you search for Wilko de Cray, not him, but his page, and you go on Info and Ads, and you can find his ads down here, right? Can a website clone visitors? What you'll see here in a second. Look, there is what he's doing here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There you go. That's what he's doing. So this is a Facebook ad. You see this unusual thing, and let's say you just about sign up, you hand over your email address, and never watch the follow-up video that's on the next page. Well, what's in your mind is this funny scene of the 4 Wilkos, right? And that's why it is absolutely worth repeating that image. So people immediately realize, I was watching that funny video with 4 Wilkos. What was that about? Yes, it was about cloning yourself, being in 4 places at once, getting 4 visitors for the price of 1, or whatever the message was in there. So people will remember it. This one, again, if you've watched the other video, there's another video where he talks about, well, you need to talk to the right audience. So if you want to have, or you have dog products, you want to talk to people who actually have dogs. And he illustrates this by him walking through the garden and pulling a bucket. So he doesn't have a dog, he's pulling a bucket. That would be totally the wrong person to address with a dog product. And again, it's a striking example where people realize and recognize this. So if you keep coming back to this example and this imagery, people will be reminded why they signed up. Okay, then a bit more advice here is, well, in the good old days, we did actually add all kinds of images and text to images, overlaid it, and That is becoming less and less common. I've showed you examples, and it's strictly limited by Facebook anyway. They've got this example that you can have up to 20%. Even that, they're constantly trying to restrict and have less and less of it. Sometimes people get away with it. They have a tool, Facebook has a tool, the grid tool, where you can check out, and it's linked in here, but you Google Facebook grid tool, where you can check an image and it'll tell you how good it is or how not good it is. But very rarely do you see ads now that have a lot of text in there. Examples, here's actually, as if I'd prepared it, right? There are examples. So when you have a t-shirt, for example, or a product box, etc., that is allowed. However, when you think about it, when you look at this here, what stands out? What stands out is this thing in the middle, right? And then possibly this here. That's where the eye goes. You really have to be dedicated to go out and read this text here. Always keep in mind, people have the attention span of a gnat these days. It's scroll, 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 scroll. I'm fairly old. How old am I? I'm 48 now, right? So I probably have more of an attention span than most youngsters combined. When I sit down with my brother, who's only 10 years younger than me, and him and his friends, who are then also a bit younger than him, when I watch them after dinner, and all they're doing is they're scrolling through whatever it is, Instagram, etc., and snap this and snap the other, they don't pay attention to anything anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, like zombies. Oh, look at this. Like, don't like, don't like. They don't go and read this kind of stuff. So, as a result, forget about text. It's basically striking images. That's what we want. Just, no, let's see if there's one more good example. No. Come on. Something that stands out. Well, as you can see, there's basically very little that really stands out, right? No, emojis. Come on, must be a good ad here. Oh, look. There is a sponsored something, and it stands out a little bit because it is not the usual style, and this use of orange has a nice contrast to the surrounding. But again, the purpose here is not to tell a story. It's not to have a message, to highlight a benefit or anything. It's really to have an excuse, to have orange on a grey or sort of almost monochrome background, attract the eye as a sort of sub-headline, explain that it is artistic photography, which is what this is, and then if I'm interested, my eye has been captured by this here, I'm now going down here and reading this. Incidentally, I'll show you in a second, I don't think this is the best use of an image. The eye goes, well, it kind of goes back here, but in this way, in this image, the contrast of this amazing is so high that my eye immediately went to this amazing. And ask yourself, when you look at this image, where does the eye go? Typically, a good image, and I'll show you examples in a minute, should capture the eye somewhere around here and then guide it to wherever you want to guide it. And here the contrast of this is so incredibly high. At the end of the day, this one doesn't really matter, but I'll give you examples now why you may wish to take this into account. And the real reason is they've done enough eye tracking studies that show if the key element is eyes or pretty face or something like that, that attracts the eye, and then the eyes look at the thing you want our eyes or the visitor's eye to look, you get much higher engagement rates and click-through rates than when you have something that kind of goes all over the place. So, let's go down here. Yeah, here's now what I've just talked about. If you had this as an image, our eye goes to eyes. That's naturally how it works. Our brain is hardwired to capture or to connect with other human beings. That's why we look at eyes first. And these eyes now look over this direction. They look to our left. And as a result, if this were an ad and we'd have a headline down here, it is extra work. We go here, we naturally, there's nothing you can do about it. Our brains now follow this gaze. We go over here, and we have to force ourselves to come back and read the headline down here. And like I've just said, attention span of gnats, more often than not, people just disappear, and now you've lost your chance. And this is not something that is theory, that is practice. It's been shown over and over again in eye tracking studies. If you can capture an eye up here and guide it to where, if you can capture it up here and guide it to where it needs to be, whether it's your headline, if you want people to go to the, if there's text in here, make it easy for the eye. So there's a whole bunch of images down here where you go, this one here could be good if there's text to the right of it, or you want people to go down to the headline. This one, borderline, this one, terrible, unless, of course, you have something up here. So you start to see how you can use a face with where it's looking to guide a message. This one here is totally against how we in the West read. So this is going in totally the wrong direction. Neutral but not great. This could be better. The overall line is going down here. Not so great. Terrible. Not great. So you see all these examples. They're not actually many great images. Whereas this one here, of course, the flow is perfect. I mean, this is in focus. This is where the eye goes first. And now you need to decide. I mean, because of the color nature of this image, the next stop would be somewhere around here, and that is roughly the right direction. You want people to go down here, and then we're used to reading, one line, next line, next line. So if the next stop is the headline underneath the image, mission accomplished. Thank you very much. Alrighty, so that was requirement number one. We want, if we go back up here, really all we're trying to do is we have ads, and we want to get people's attention, and then we have the continuation of the story on the continuing pages and marketing materials. So number one, we've just talked about getting people's attention. Now we look at the start and continue a story. And that is the real thing we're doing here, is building familiarity. That's really what I've talked about in several examples now. We want people to, at every single step, go, yes, I am in the right place. I have seen this, I remember this. That was that funny story about the 4 guys on the sofa. Yes, I remember. That is the funny story with the I don't have a dog, I don't have a bucket, etc., etc. Right? And that's why, if we can, we use the same kind of images or imagery throughout all the marketing materials. At every single step, it has to be, yes, I've seen this before, I'm in the right place. That's the key thing. Am I in the right place? If people have to spend energy on thinking, am I in the right place? That is wasted mental energy. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to go in there. So basically all I'm doing here is I'm highlighting what happens in this Wilko example, where they first sign up, then they go through the video or start looking at it, and they need to know that they're in the right place, depending on how far they have gone through the video. And that's why, if you're looking for images for retargeting ads, the big question is, well, did they sign up but never actually watch the video? Well, then we pick them up where they left off, namely the original ad that targeted them. If, however, they stop during the first part of the video, where he talks about himself, his story, etc., then take an image from that part of the video. If, on the other hand, they went all the way through and they stopped at the feature and benefit and never bought, well, that's where you pick them up. They were at the features and benefits, they saw the product shot, and now it's a good time to pick them up there. So here are 2 questions I think you can and should ask yourself at all times. Whenever you're deciding, or you need to decide if an image you found is good or not, ask these 2 questions. Number 1, would it be appropriate to use this image not just in the ad, but then on everything else, on the landing pages, in emails, in brochures, in products, in Messenger, etc. So question number 1 is, am I using this purely to have a shocker, to stop the scroll? Or is it something I can use throughout? Can I continue telling a story? And if I did, would people, when they see it, say to themselves, yes, I remember that, I am in the right place. And ideally, of course, I have a good feeling about it. Yeah? It is okay to use shocking images to get attention, but at the end of the day, if it is too off-putting and too scary and too uncomfortable, at some point people are going to stop looking at it, right? So you need to transition the story over to something positive at some point. So those 2 questions: is it appropriate to use it everywhere? And will people say, I remember that, I'm in the right place? Now, if it's an image that is full of detail and it is hard to remember what you were focusing on and it's hard to remember how it connects to the story you are telling, then it's not a good image. So if the answer is no, then it's probably not a good image to use. So in a way, here's a summary of good, great, and fabulous image. A good image is one that gets someone's attention. A great image gets that attention and reminds them of what they were doing. For example, watching a video and where in the video they were. And a fabulous image gets the attention, reminds them where they were and what they were doing, and elicits an emotional response. That's my summary of what a good, great, and fabulous image is. So just to sum up, I guess, technical requirements, they have to be able, or you need to be able to see them and see enough detail on both desktop as well as mobile devices, and that's why I recommend going for bold, big pieces of information, bold colors, something that's easy to look at, especially when you're targeting an audience that's a little bit older. Like I said, I'm 48, and my eyes are nowhere near as good as they used to be when I was 20. And as a result, I need to start doing the anti-pinch on my mobile phone screen and go, yes, let me zoom in. So focus on the core elements to get someone's attention. That could be a face instead of a whole person, or even zoom in, use the eyes instead of a whole face, like the cat example I showed you above. And also keep in mind that Facebook is constantly testing different image formats. So for example, at the moment they are doing a lot of square images, and let's see if we can find a good example. No, that is not square. Here is sort of the almost square example. This here again is almost square. So suddenly, what used to be just sort of a thin stripe, so here's a very thin, horizontal stripe. They've gone over to these, especially on mobile phones, big screen filling formats. And that means when you go and start looking for images, make sure they actually work in different formats. If you use something like these images here, they would work purely in the portrait, but not in landscape format or square. So what I tend to do is basically look for images that have a certain background color, so I can extend it in Photoshop. So this one here would just extend the black background, here would extend the white background, and that way I can use them in different image formats. This one here, very hard to extend. And to wrap this whole thing up, here's a final thought. When you're starting to look for images, it's very easy to get bogged down and search for the perfect image. Oh, is this going to work better than the other? Is that, how about this here, etc. And before you know it, you are overanalyzing and critiquing and dismissing things in your mind. And the fact is, like everything in advertising, you cannot ever predict how the market is going to react to a particular image. And the only way to find out if it's a good image or a great image or a fabulous image is to basically test it. So come up with a nice collection of candidate images, and then the market decides which one they pay the most attention to. And yes, over time you will develop a feeling, a gut feeling for what works and what doesn't work for your market. But in the beginning, and even after many years of experience, there is no fact, there is no knowing that this particular one is going to work better than another one. So make your life easy. Take images you like, you think make sense, you think you can use throughout, that tell a good story, they remind people of something, and then just simply test them. There you go. So that's my half-hour take on how to use images in Facebook ads or ads in general and marketing. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below. Alrighty, cheers, bye.